everyone. Welcome to the live stream. Today we have kind of a lot to go over. I'm excited because it seems like Midjourney's editor is about to get another update that hopefully will make it really effective for storytelling. And I want to figure out how to use it as well as possible, but also I'm not really caught up with the latest changes they've made so much. And so I really have to dig deep and figure out exactly what it's now able to do, how much we've already unlocked with Midjourney's new editor, and really try to set the stage for what are they about to add and how do we make the best use out of it for the purposes of creating stories and creating cool characters and scenes and ideas and trying to do the best we can and use the editor effectively. Of course, in my latest video, we were working with Omni references and trying to set up a way where we can use two Omni references at the same time to create scenes. And I think that was an exciting video. I think a lot of you really appreciated it. But there's these new tools come at a cost where things like sometimes don't look quite right. And basic human characters that really you want to have look as much like your Omni reference as possible can turn out really well. There tends to be some problem in a generation that you want to try to fix, but that can be tough. But as you have less human characters and characters that are a little bit more complicated, but also obviously need to be precise and accurate because those things matter too, we can kind of see, for example, this robot. That's sort of what I've been doing for the past little while we're getting the stream up, is kind of seeing what Midjourney can do on its own with some of these characters, and hopefully we'll find a way to solve some of the problems we see here, even with the current editor. And hopefully, when the editor comes out, it'll become even easier. And so that's kind of what I've got going on. I also will be talking today about the tool I've been developing, and what that is kind of a method to guide together. This is tools.glibetry.com. We'll see if it really applies with what we're doing today, but the goal is to get past generating things in Midjourney and then using this editor to make specific changes, but then to pull all of those back so that a generated thing that is effective can be used in your original scene. And it's a good place to stay organized and to create kind of final renders of your images. And so with all that out of the way, let's kind of dive into the editor and see where we are at. Feel free to pause or stop me at any time if you guys have questions in the chat. I am happy to answer them. Excited to have so many of you stopping in, and it seems like, hang on, we already have 5 likes on the stream with, we barely started, so thank you guys for liking the stream. It helps more people find this, helps more people see it, and I really appreciate it because it seems like you like me and the stream. And how fun is that, right? All right. To the editor. So this, even as simple as solving problems, I find one of the key things for the editor is that it does sort of resolve blemishes. When things don't look perfect, when we have an arm going off to the side and then starting again from, I don't know, I imagine this arm is coming out of the middle of his back somewhere. It's kind of tough to make that better, but when you erase things in the editor, it tries to guess the kind of best connection that might happen between these transparent pixel, or where these transparent pixels are, and what already exists. And unlike some editing tools like in 4.0 and in Gemini, instead of redrawing everything, it literally locks in the pixels of the good stuff so that you can make changes to the bad stuff. And Photoshop does the same thing as this if you've used their generative AI in their generative fill type things, but this is helpful for us. But I'm used to this part. This is just sort of the in-painting that we've had for a while. They've added this sort of smart select and these layers that will hopefully make things even more effective, even better, even easier to use. So I kind of want to see if we can sort of resolve some of these characters that we've created. And so obviously you see that the robot is sometimes a bit of a mess. Let's see. And the true reference here, kind of, he has like the inner workings, the pipe going up through his belly, and then his chest starts, and obviously the edited version was better, and I thought what we were using, so let's drag this in. But we want to kind of have that be more consistent as we're creating these characters and make this look as good as we can. And I'm hoping that this sort of smart select, right, when we have kind of the high quality one that we like, we should be able to kind of get a correct robot that we can have like layers for. I believe holding shift turns this exclude on. So I clicked inside my robot, and now I'm clicking outside my robot so that it becomes accurate, and I'll just sort of keep clicking on things until Midjourney knows this is the outside, outside. Midjourney knows where my robot is. And, oh, that's like this. In theory, it gets closer to knowing the more you add. It doesn't really seem like it's able to kind of dig its way out. I'm not super worried about this. I do kind of want this thing, or this thing. And it seems like now if we erase my background, so Control Z works, which is helpful. I want my robot. I want to be able to release some of this stuff, right? So I don't really want this kind of inner workings, but I want a pretty good system here. And so now if I download this image and save my current edit, the idea is now I have a layer that I can add in here, and suddenly I can put my robot exactly where I want to in some other scenes. And I might keep a head that I like, but this main body or this main piece might be useful to sort of solving some problems. And I believe they've added this like rotation feature that lets us kind of, you know, really place things exactly where I want them. And hopefully we can kind of build our character better using that sort of asset we just quickly made and start to solve some problems. And so as we kind of see, let's see one that feels close, but obviously not right. So this here, I don't really like the other character either. So let's do this one, right? So in the editor, we have this character and we have this other one in the background that's just wrong. And so even sort of off the bat, we can clean this up a little bit just by erasing it, right? So hey, fix blemishes, what the editor seems to be able to do. I can't have oref in here, so I need to delete that out. If the Midjourney editor fixes blemishes, that means, hey, the character that we didn't like can just go away. And if it's described here in a certain way, we won't have the character in both places. And so it should just leave this erased, and now we have sort of a door or an office in the background, something else that is pretty clean. I think the door is kind of nice. But also, we want sort of this underneath our robot area to be more right. And so hopefully, and this is my theory, if I have my asset that I just made, I downloaded that current edit, this is something that Midjourney can use to sort of get some things right about my character. I actually don't mind how his antenna worked. I don't really mind how this came together, but we may be able to. And so now on this layer, I can erase out his old head and put in his new stuff. And it seems like this may be a path, right? I have a little bit more to erase here. This may be a path to sort of solve some problems we have with this scene. And it's not 100% perfect, but if we generate this, Midjourney should fill in the gaps in a way that makes as much sense as possible. And because we sort of have the distance between this bottom part and this top part and everything we're trying to get done, it should turn out pretty well if it can. I guess I'm a little worried that it misunderstands. Unfortunately, at least as far as I know, I can't still have omni references in the editor to help guide it a little bit further. But already, this is a huge improvement for how high quality my character is in this scene based on what we had before. And so suddenly, if I'm kind of able to erase a little bit more out and guide it in this way, we should have used this layer functionality to kind of put these characters together. And now what the editor has always been good at, right, is zooming out and sort of keeping the quality that you've come up with and generate this. And now we sort of have this new expression and this new scene, and we've gone from what was a bit of a mess and eventually became like a more accurate interpretation of our robot that we then continued to clean up and zoom out on, and now we're sort of getting a fleshed out scene that feels pretty close. And even now, we can kind of work on what does this second phase look like. We can drag this guy back in and see how we're doing compared to how he should look. And it's feeling pretty close, but we want to kind of get to where his feet should be, in theory, right? So if I can kind of go ahead and erase out now sort of this like top portion, maybe I'll bring back his hands though, right? Well, I guess I don't have hands that are that good on here, so I just have to get a little lucky. I remember when we erased out that original robot, it became tough to kind of place it there, but maybe this hand can improve, and if we, in this first layer, erase out the hand that's wrong here, we can kind of clean this up, erase out some more of this, and our robot can sort of have the feet that he's supposed to have in this scene. And in theory, generating this with just my same exact prompt, we now have a hand in place, so it should be able to have the context of this hand when it's generating this one, and it shouldn't make too much of a mess this time. And even without an omni reference, which I think I get an error when I sort of, and at least I did yesterday, but when I try to generate something with an omni reference, no, it just erases it out. Omni reference is not supported for this type of job. I think they're going to add that. So I think we're going to get omni reference eventually. And so what that would mean is instead of necessarily needing to do all of this work, which kind of feels a bit like Photoshop, we can streamline it and sort of correct a face using it internally, right? So sort of the problem with this drag and drop, right, is it relies on the character facing the same way as you had it. And so like the head could move, and so we use the head from the original generation, but our body had to be facing the same way it was in that image we erased. And so if we took it out of a different one, we'd have to sort of take pieces that feel a little bit less good. But could we, and we can kind of imagine this path, right? And I'm not sure it'll happen exactly, but what if we took a few different layers, right? So we drag our robot in, and so this is his body, and we'll erase this out. So now we have a layer for his body. We drag it in again. Now we have a layer for underneath here. I should still be on this layer. A layer for this, and we get to place that where we want it, and we'll maybe do it again. So let's paint, erase a layer for his feet. And so now we have almost, if we do this right, control over his pose, in theory, right? We can kind of erase and place and now grab our next one and maybe make it bigger or smaller, but also maybe rotate it a little bit so that he seems a little bit more off. I want to move the middle one. That's a pain. Can I drag this down and now move the middle one? Yeah. So you may notice this if you're trying to do this in Midjourney, you can't click through transparency. So you're not able to sort of place the thing where you want to have it if it's behind it. So you need to kind of drag these layers so that the one that you're trying to move is on top if you're trying to sort of place and pose a character a specific way. But we're kind of making a little bit of progress in sort of placing this scene how we want it. We can sort of have the feet here. We can sort of bring the layer up and sort of drag this way. And what if I wanted it like sort of going the other way and maybe erase a little bit more of this so it can kind of draw it to the right place. But I want just a little bit so that it sort of knows to sort of draw that type of stuff and generate this. Vorpine has a suggestion. It'd be fantastic if they added more brush options, magic wand type selections for characters, etc. Yeah, I feel like that could be handy. So why didn't this work? Is it just because I have a few layers and rotations? And oh no, I have an omni-reference weight. Okay, come back, generate this. Hopefully it supports this much. But like this means we can kind of pose our characters, which how nice is that? And yeah, I think a magic wand selection while this is generating could be very cool. I think our smart select gets us pretty close to that type of thing. And it's like, oh, I can grab a character or I can grab a thing. And we sort of have some flexibility here to now pose our character and also make a bit of a mess. And so could we build scenes out like this and then come through? And the other thing is, do we have omni-reference in retexture, right? I'm not sure about this. I think probably not yet, but if this isn't perfect, but I like the pose that I've built and I want it to feel more like my character, could I generate this with the omni-reference in place and retexture this whole scene? No, I cannot. Just because I'm curious, can I just run this? How does retexture handle fixing some of these things, or does it just make a mess? We'll almost certainly lose our character consistency, but like how powerful would this be at like making a more interesting robot? That seems kind of nice. Yeah, it's obviously not the same guy, but cool flexibility. And so that seems like to me quite a bit of work for kind of one scene. I know that we're like kind of having to balance whether we go in that direction or we sort of want to choose to like, oh, okay, I want to make an entire story. I want to make an entire thing and I want to get pretty close and then resolve some little issues, maybe one at a time. And so if, for instance, we take a few of these guys that turned out well, so maybe the one we just created, hey, this is pretty cool, but maybe he looks a little funky. Maybe we'll upscale some things and say, hey, I want to continue to make changes and fix these upscaled images so that we can improve. Ideascope says, I recently bought Midjourney and have been experimenting, and I never knew you could use this in the way you're using it. Really impressive. Thanks, Libitree. That's nice, Ideascope. Yeah, this is me learning too. This is sort of a new change right now about how to use the editor. It seems like the editor has been changing and it's about to change more. And I just kind of want to be at the front of the line and know what's going on with this. And for all of you tuning in right now, I think hopefully you guys appreciate sort of this experimentation, seeing what's going on. Because it's kind of wild how much you can do. And I think a lot of people see, oh, that's an update. Okay, bye. And then it's sort of over. But I really want to dig into what can we do with this? What can't we do with this? How is it powerful and how isn't it? Because that's kind of the tough thing about making something as good as we can out of Midjourney, right? A lot of times character consistency is hard and a lot of work. And how do we kind of make decisions so that it's less work and less hard? Like, this is a cool scene, but I don't know, it's like some things feel a little bit off compared to others. He's like maybe a little too big, and maybe his like buttons are a little bit too large, and I want to make little tiny changes to make things a little bit easier. And so, maybe this is a cuter one and we kind of like the vibe for it. Maybe we'll upscale a few more and sort of like have some high quality images that we want to control. Because it seems cool to be able to like take scenes that we like and make them all better. And we could even upscale this one. But what does that involve, right? Is like omnireference makes more of a mess the less prominent scenes are. And so how do we kind of bring it back and make exactly what we're after? This is a cool scene again, but it's like not quite right. And so I believe that it's cool to be able to to show like we were doing, dragging something into the editor and saying, hey, this is cool, but not quite right. Let's drag in our second layer, and I'll sort of do this at full speed now, right? And I just want to sort of use some of these things to make him feel more consistent, right? And so I can erase some of this and some of this and kind of have some of these pieces be correct. But let Midjourney sort of fill out everything else so that it's not too much of a mess. And I'll even come back to the layer one and erase a little bit more of his feet so that it can feel more right. And then what I may do, right, so I think we'll get a better quality one with an image reference too, so that it knows what our character is trying to be. So instead of an omni-reference, which it doesn't let us use yet, let's use an image reference, and maybe we'll try to fix this character at the same time. And we could even do something similar with dragging him in as another layer and selecting him. Cool, so now I have his face. I'll erase the background from this layer and put him here, right? So this should, now that we generate sort of the next thing, we're gonna have a better thing. I'm gonna add, I can't use omni weight. I'm gonna add an image weight so it follows it a little bit closer. Goes as high as 3, so that's how far image weight can go. I did notice we hopped up to 10 likes, so thank you everyone who's chosen to like the video so far. I really appreciate every single one of you. And it helps more people find the video, the stream, and we can learn this stuff together, and we'll see how well an image reference does sort of fixing this character. And it's obviously worse than omni-reference, right? It's like we have problems we have not resolved here, but I at least have this character's face now, and maybe we can like get a little bit better over time as we sort of piece this robot together, right? And it's like what I probably needed to do was make this pasted in layer smaller, right? So it's like, hey, this is too large a character. Let's kind of take some of these things, and I might even erase all of his feet. It's so powerful. Yeah, it feels like it. It feels like we're able to do quite a bit. And then come over, erase a little bit more of this, and maybe come over here and just erase some of the edges so that it can draw things correctly, and then erase his head. And maybe we can make this a little bit bigger still. Frame and resize, rotate just a little bit, and place right here. We can kind of fix this right how it is, right here. And we make some progress. But we are fighting with it still. The image prompt is cool, but what does it really accomplish? Well, hey, one thing at a time. we're starting to get something that's closer to our actual character. And so here's where I think it starts to get even harder, right? Is we don't know that this scene is kind of what we want it to be. Let's sort of look at some of our upscales and sort of see the characters we've made that like aren't quite right. And so we kind of like, hey, these are sort of cool. And this is the tool that I've been working on that helps organize this stuff so you know sort of what to do next. And you can tell Midjourney a little bit easier how to do this. This is the first time I've kind of been talking about this publicly. So, things are still early access. We'll sort of see what happens. I haven't posted this in a video yet because it really sort of depends on how these things come together. But the idea is we have a bunch of images that we can use to sort of understand what our character should look like, but also to identify where the problems are that we need to fix and kind of make fixes all at once. I don't know if you guys remember my video about the angel character, where it was really hard to get Midjourney to kind of do all of this stuff, where you have a key, you have a halo, you have the blonde hair, and you have the blue eyes, and you have the purple wings and the feather dress, and it's like hard to get it to do that. Omnireference helps, and it's pretty good at getting pretty close. But what I did in that video was I put things side by side so that you're able to use the content from the image you generated to help guide the next piece of things. And now with the editor, that becomes a much less challenging problem. It used to be really hard, right? We used to like kind of have to place, go into Photoshop and place what we liked and what we didn't like into something else, and you can't kind of keep something like the key and then put it into the scenes together, right? And so as I like look at this character and I'm like, hey, what do I want this character to look like? I can kind of say, you know what I really want to do is look at these three images side by side and make the fixes that I need to make. What's right about him and what's wrong about him. And actually, this is pretty close, right? And as I kind of keep looking, where do I start to have problems with this character? And it's like, a lot of them are pretty good, but his face starts to get a little derpy as we like get a little farther along, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, this is sort of bad. This is sort of bad. These are a little bit more reasonable, but he's kind of cross-eyed here and kind of better here. You tested relative influence between mood boards and omnireferences to help guide generation. I found style references more effective with omnireferences than mood board at the moment, and it might just be like a weight thing. We can probably get a little closer with a good mood board, but it tends to use your omnireference style pretty well on its own if you don't describe a style with too much detail. So I haven't found too much of a need for that, but if you run into issues, let me know. I'd be curious to see kind of like what you end up getting. And the idea here is that you want to be able to kind of make fixes to, hey, this is a bad mouth and this is a good mouth, and this is a bad eye and this is a good eye. And you want to be able to kind of let Midjourney know the context of that stuff as we are using it in the editor. And so the idea here is that if we create a new generation with what I just downloaded off of my tool that's helping organize these things. This is stuff you can do in Photoshop if that's interesting to you. But the idea is I can sort of erase just the things I want to. And for instance, if something about, and his goggles really aren't bad, but if one of his goggles were bad, we can kind of make changes here and say, hey, this is something I don't like, is these sort of like extra shadows. And I can now correct the things that are weird about this character all at once across all four of these images. And so I can kind of now take, right, these ones that were pretty good and use these as an image reference, right? Hey, pretty good face, pretty good face, pretty good face. Take the stitched image from here and use it as an image reference. And that's cool. And we can do even better, right? We can take our original reference as another layer, drag it into here and say, you know what's awesome is we have some pretty good goggles right here, right? And so it's like, I want to be able to use the layer of these goggles on, and here's the idea, on this character here. So we can take this, we can resize it, and we can put it into place exactly where we want to. And Midjourney's a little finicky, but it's a lot easier than Photoshop, right? And we can make the goggles look like the goggles that we actually want. And so this one here, it might need a little bit more painting, so we can kind of erase this out and erase this out, and then really put it exactly where it is we want it. Again, we can rotate as needed so it really feels like it fits on his head. And now this generation, we can kind of resolve all of these issues at once. And the idea is when you're using these different pieces of the character, you can see this mouth refers to this mouth, and this mouth refers to this one. And we can see the eyes in this here, 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 and we can start to draw eyes in the same way across all of these characters. And so my image reference that's like guiding the stitch of how these things are meant to look can kind of keep our art style alive and make some really good decisions about how to create this face. I actually really love this example, right? Because normally Midjourney doesn't keep making the smile and keep making the inside of the mouth the same way. It like draws it different each time. And if you wanted to actually like create a book about this guy, you'd feel like you've lost an important detail about your style. But now we can just, if you wanted to use my tool, highlight the pieces that you think are important, right? It's like, hey, I want to fix this stuff. I want to fix this stuff. And you can then kind of go into your character and make the exact changes you want, and then you have what seems like a really cool way to edit exactly what it is you want to. And this would be almost useless on its own, right? You couldn't just drag these straight into Midjourney and then say, I'm done, because all of these images are a part of a scene that we decided we like. And so this image here, if I download it, it's not useful to me as a storyteller. But if I bring it back into kind of what I've created here, the purpose of this is to say, you know what I really want is to keep track of where each of these images are in their scene. This face goes here, this face goes here, this face goes here, and this one goes here. And if we keep track of where those things are and calculate it exactly so we know exactly where they each should be, we can say, hey, this is now this, and this is now this. And so side by side, we've made a fix to our character, and we can make it, rather than having this sort of messy mouth that just close up and not ideal, we can now resolve it and have it look really good right in place immediately. And so if that's interesting to you, this is tools.glibetry.com. It's right here on my website. I'm still like working out a few of the bugs, but obviously you can see that these things work. Early access, first time I'm talking about it online. If you guys are interested in that, I think it's a really powerful way to really resolve problems in your generations and then actually work on it in terms of a project that keeps track of everything you have. The idea here is you can review the differences between each of these things, because it's possible you've uploaded the wrong thing, and you can either accept the changes or reject them. Once you accept them, they're locked in, and while you're sort of waiting for that, this is in this locked status, so you don't accidentally make changes before you put things up. This does one thing, it does it really well, and I want to keep adding things that unlock more capabilities from Midjourney, and it just takes development. So I'm kind of excited to kind of keep these things going. I need to upload this again, because if you step away from it, you come off. But that's sort of the idea here. If we accept all changes, suddenly we have a better image to work with, and I think it's really, really powerful, especially with these new editor changes that Midjourney is adding. And I think if we can include omnireference and we can include some of the other things that are really exciting along the way, we can not only have an image reference guiding Midjourney to make these more consistent, but we can be very precise about what it is we're controlling. And here in the editor, I don't know, it's really, really cool and really, really exciting. Just so you know, I do have a deal for the first 500 people. It's like 50% off the normal price if you're interested in trying it out right now. Again, it's, you know, brand new, and I'm excited to share it with you guys. This is the only time I'm ever doing this. I'm offering this price forever. So as I add more things and AI features, you are able to lock in this yearly subscription if you choose the yearly plan and kind of make this work for you and at that price forever, no matter what I end up adding to that premium plan. So if you're interested, happy to kind of get you guys as the very first people seeing it on board, and feel free to shoot me an email or post in the comments if you have any questions or things you need help with, because I'm really excited about kind of getting this thing to you guys. Oh, am I back? Hey, take two. I lost internet for a little bit. I resetted my router and modem, and I think we are here again. I'm not really sure what that does to the YouTube VOD and kind of what it does to the, you know, video in the end, but I think we're all here again. Feel free to let me know in the chat if you can see or hear, but I think we're back on the internet. So yeah, we were just diving into the editor and trying to figure out how else we can continue to sort of resolve problems on our characters and do better sort of creating compositions and stories. And I need to get back into it. It seems to be working again. So let's jump back into the editor, upload some images, and I will go from here. We have some cool ones in the scene, and it's actually almost better if we can, back on the internet, almost better if we can jump into some of these new creations and see how else we may want to change some of these scenes, right? Our robot in the background really looks a little messy, but we may be able to fix that in many of these scenes at once if we kind of make some selections on him and see how much we can do to improve what we have going on. And so this was actually the one that we worked on for a little bit earlier. And so if I download and lock this image, we may be able to kind of get back on track and fix some parts of our character. So that stitch is now in my downloads. If I can jump back into Midjourney, create a new stitch here and see if we can kind of follow those steps. This image must be a little bit smaller. I think I can make that happen. I think using an upscaled image as the first image makes it a little bit tough. But if I download this image, no, if I download and lock this again, we have a better stitch that we can bring to Midjourney and start to actually solve some problems. How big is this? 10.2. Tiny, tiny bit too big. There we go. 9.2, that's better. And so now we can start to see what it is we want to fix. And so obviously I can sort of identify some things in this robot that didn't turn out perfectly from one scene to another, but we have a cool mix of poses and situations that I think will make for cool creations here. And so what really needs to happen is we need, hopefully, maybe some of these as layers that we can use to kind of make our character better, right? So what goes in sort of this section needs to kind of be a simple version of whatever it is that we're trying to create. And actually being able to see what our character looks like throughout the image will lead towards a higher quality generation when we actually click generate, because we have the context of the other images in here. So let me go ahead and erase some things around here so we can kind of use this as the first bit. And in this layer, we can kind of erase behind and only take what we really want to see. And so this cleans up just a little bit, and we start to have a cleaner idea of how this character should look in this scene, in this context. So let me actually remove the feet off this part because we want his feet to stay the same so that his anatomy makes sense in the larger image. And then we can kind of do similar things to the other pieces of this character. Anything that we want to make closer to right, we can kind of do that in one go. And it may take a little bit of a prompt. I'm sure I have something written for these characters, but basically it's 4 robots, side by side. Caps lock is so hard. Side by side illustrations of the same robot character in unique scenes, different sizes and angles, shown in a drawn cartoon like style. And a prompt like this will help us generate from this stitch of 4 different images of the same character and hopefully resolve some of the problems we get by really labeling what is right from the background of a scene like this. And we could sort of take this scene in its entirety, right, as a layer 2, and maybe use some of the colors of this area as the background for what goes next to the thing we fixed, right? And so if we have maybe a little bit here of just background, that's something we can use as we place into this scene here. And it's like it can actually be a correct thing that's going to go under what we uploaded so that we can see the exact size of the I guess piping that is used to make this robot the anatomy that he has. And that sort of control lets us potentially resolve many of these problems at once. And we could kind of do the same sort of thing with this character on this side if we don't get as far as we would like to. But because there's context of this character in sort of the other scenes, we're able to resolve some of these issues all at once in one go, and it sort of tells this character how to handle that too. And so now we can kind of take this and clean it up one more time, and it knows almost exactly what to do with this character, and the scene starts to make a little bit more sense. And again, we can kind of think about exactly what this should look like in certain places, and even just erasing a blemish, right, will guide Midjourney into doing what makes the most sense based on the context that it has within the image data of the image it's working with. So an edit can be pretty powerful in this way, and even this robot on fire can start to feel pretty clean and easy to understand, and we can start to make a robot that feels a lot closer to our actual goal. And this is feeling pretty impressive. Even taking something like this gets us pretty darn close. I might think about upscaling this to my gallery, and we can sort of compare how well the upscaled version goes back into the scenes versus how well the actual version does. But I may actually take this one because I think it's a better representation of actually where that robot should go. And of course, having an image reference does certainly help guide the robot to being more accurate, right? So we didn't do that last time, but maybe this time we can start to really fix like what does the bottom of this robot look like? Well, it's just one smooth thing and doesn't have two like bonus plugs going on. So that generation may make some progress for us to create a pretty cool scene for this character, and just having an image reference lets it simplify the bottom part, and maybe we could do the same thing again here and sort of finish off this character in a way that makes a little bit more sense. Sorry about my internet falling apart. That like got my adrenaline pumping. But we're back. Everything's going. And look at that. We have 18 likes on the stream. Thank you guys so much for liking the video. I appreciate having you here, having you participating and learning about how this stuff works. It's really cool to kind of have it happen. So let me upscale this one and download the current generation, because I think all three of these look more like the character that they were, and that means jumping back in and potentially taking this stitch that we just generated of these characters can kind of like clean up all of that mess, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, and like how much cleaner is that character? It's a little fuzzy. This is why I thought upscaling may help. The problem is Midjourney's upscale isn't pixel perfect all the time. So when this is done, we may see that it's just like things are a little bit more off. And so it might require us downloading kind of the end result image and seeing like to avoid seeing this sort of blur in the distance. So it's not too bad. I think it's like pretty good in some of these old and new. It's like, yeah, we changed this and it's a little bit blurred. Maybe an upscale will help, but I'm not sure it's totally necessary either. Yeah, so here with the upscale, it looks a little bit better. Some things still feel a little bit less like hand-drawn, unfortunately. So, you know, I'm hoping as we start to get on top of these things that even Midjourney's upscaler will continue to improve. I believe they have one on the docket as something to announce. So let's reject this one for now, and let's see what happens when we use the upscaled version of this image as we put it back into the scenes we've created. And so sort of the side by side of these, we've kind of made this correction of this like wobbly robot and this fireborn robot, and it feels a lot more accurate to the character we've created. And how does it look in an actual image? Right, this is what I was sort of worried about with the upscale, is sometimes it's a little off, but that's not bad at all. How about this one? New. Yeah, that's not bad at all either. It's lining up nicely. So Midjourney didn't mess with it too much. This one's a little bit, we've gotten a little line in it. So Midjourney might have added something to the edge or taken the edge of the one next to it with the upscale because it like moves over by a little bit. I think that the sort of blurry one wasn't bad. So let's reject one more time. Drag in our favorite one. And call it a day right here. So we'll accept these changes and see how nicely our new character is sort of put into these full images. And it feels, it's not done yet. You can see it's still working on the exception, or maybe I didn't click it. I'll let it be for a second. Haha. And now we have kind of these full characters with the change that we've made. And not only do we want to be able to select characters, but it's nice to be able to define things if we're telling a story about our scenes, right? It's like, you know what? In our scenes, I think that tires, for example, should look a certain way. And so now you can go through your entire book and select all the places where tires appear and make the corrections that you ended up wanting to and resolve a lot of issues for your story and your concepts. And I really like that we can kind of build our way into. And the moment OmniReference is available, we can really fix specific characters, objects, and things with in one of these stitches, uploading this here, right? So we can sort of simulate it a little bit with with a character reference, right? So if we kind of jump over to version 6.1 and we have, for example, a character reference of this guy here, and we paste this as a character reference in this, and we paste this as a character reference here, we can sort of imagine that, oh, actually, erasing out quite a bit of here. It's not perfect. Obviously, character reference is not great at robots. But the idea is if we have this reference here and we erase almost everything, now just a cref, multiple character references. I'm on, oh, it stayed on version 7. So I go to version 6.1 is what I tried to do. Left a little text in the prompt. And generate this with character references. And change my profile. A lot to ask. Midjourney makes it challenging to bounce back and forth. But I now am on the other version successfully, and it's way better. But the idea is, and again, character reference is not so effective with robots, but you can see how it tries to interpret this as a character and puts that character into all 3 of these places at once. And so even if your images are very off, when OmniReference comes out and it can actually do a good job with robots, we can kind of resolve things so all of these characters look the same, even if we have very little data about those characters as we create our scenes. And yeah, this is an example. It's not necessarily a good representation of what can be done this way, but I'm excited to find out what that may end up looking like. So beyond that, so we've sort of tackled layers to a certain degree. We've tackled smart select to a certain degree. I kind of want to be able to select particular places within an image and have Midjourney know what it is that I was talking about and understand that's the selection, and we can either keep it by erasing the background or remove it by erasing the selection. And it tends to be that even if you do that, you might have a few things right on the edge. I miss being able to zoom in on my app, but and I can't do that here, but you may need to erase the edge a little bit bigger once you've done something like this, just so that there's really nothing left from your original thing that you've erased, but you're able to kind of make things look the way that you ended up wanting to. And obviously this character reference test would have gone a lot better if we were actually using a person. But it seems like a nice way to kind of build out consistency across a number of characters that we may not have been able to do so easily before. And so if we kind of jump over to our angel, right? If we kind of say, hey, let's sort of talk about photorealism and having a key that we really like, and versus sort of a generated key that is not quite perfect, though these aren't necessarily bad. There's a few that are, right? So if we kind of like download some of these that don't meet our recommendations, how can we kind of use this tool to resolve some of those issues, right? And fix it with what does kind of work and what is the key that we want it to look like, which is our maybe original reference. And so like some things don't look quite right, but even if you have just one that does look right, we can find that useful. And so in the editor, right, we have an angel with a key in place. The good one probably looks like this. And we can kind of grab a real reference of what it is that we want it to look like in the editor, create a new one, can create this, and now we have like a necklace and a key area that we might want to put in any scene, right? And it's like we can resolve the inaccuracy about this piece in any other image by taking this generation, or this thing that we found useful. If you remember from the video where I created this, it was something that I started close up in, so it was just an image of a key once upon a time, and then I slowly zoomed out until I actually got my character. So if we download the current edit, so we have just the key as something we can add as another layer, that lets us put this anywhere we want to and rotate it, which means, right, if we kind of come over to here and I create a project for my angel with purple wings, we could imagine grabbing or putting these images that we downloaded back in and really making corrections to something as precise as what does the key around her neck look like. Omnireference gets us pretty far, but the keys look different across all of these characters, and it's nice to be able to really see exactly that this key looks like this key, looks like this key, looks like this key. We can actually have accuracy for what we're trying to create here, right? And so literally, I just want to focus in on this part of these images, right? Where I can correct the key as it stands, right? And so I want to put the key into these scenes and try to really guide where Midjourney interprets this. I assume the moderator won't be mad at me trying to do this. I might just do 4 of them because I don't want to get too wide. Otherwise, Midjourney will have to scale down what I've ended up using. But we can use this kind of thing to fix precise things about our almost photorealistic characters all at once. So let's download and lock this selection so that we can make changes to it. And let's bring it to Midjourney. So I'll go new. I will edit my uploaded image and I'll use that stitch collection. Midjourney gets tired sometimes, so we have to refresh and then we do it again. But now, like, a lot of these are not how it should look, right? And we don't want the key to be simply wrong. And so we can now erase out each of these moments. I shouldn't erase. So one of the things that we're doing if we're going to put something back into the scene is I shouldn't allow there to be anything on the edge that has changed. But now if I drag in this as a few layers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, we're able to put this exactly where I want it. So on this lady, like, where does this precisely go? Well, it might be something like this, right? And we might have to erase it a little bit more to kind of like get it to fit in perfectly. And for this one, where does this go? Well, it might be something like this. And we can kind of figure out where to put this part of our characters so that Midjourney gets it right. And we can kind of continue that for this third one. Again, this third one, I need to bring above the layer here, otherwise I can't grab it so easily. But now I can kind of put it into here, and this one rotates actually this way, right? To kind of get it to fit in, and maybe down a little bit lower, we can erase a little bit more. But like, this would be kind of how we grab the correction here. And we have to be a little bit more careful this time because of the fact that the lighting doesn't match so nicely. This fourth one I don't think we'll end up needing. But we can kind of see what we're able to work with here, right? If I kind of go through starting with this one, there's some things I have to erase, and I don't want things to be so bright. And so I can kind of erase these things out here so that it doesn't look quite so different from how it should. But also maybe from this image, I could erase out a little bit more so that there's room to really put this whole thing. And maybe I can even resize this again and rotate a little further so that it fits a little bit more nicely in this part of the scene without getting too aggressive. And so we can kind of do a similar erasing when we come to this one. I think this goes up a little bit too high on this corner. And it may be that this key isn't really facing the right direction anymore. So if we kind of come back to this and say, hey, I want room to sort of put the key coming down, we may drag another layer of this in and have the key turned straight down after it gets to the point. And so now we sort of follow this nice arch, but then the key is going straight down, and it actually rests nicely on this scene. So we can kind of like place our character a little bit more carefully, and we can erase just enough so that everything kind of fits. And in this here, I want to erase a little bit more so that it fits a little bit more nicely. But now generating this side by side photos of a necklace with a key on it. Now we've extremely accurately controlled exactly what's around this angel's neck, so that when we generate this, and assuming we don't get hit by a moderator, which I don't think we are, we're doing something within the bounds of what Midjourney should allow. Obviously this is 6.1, so we may have had some problems that weren't initially what version 6.1 is able to do. So maybe I should really jump over to version 7 again. And clean this up a little more carefully, right? So just here, we can also probably describe some of these things with more clarity. And also it might be valuable to erase more to allow it to like fit these into a scene that really makes sense. So that we don't have kind of this stitched look in some cases. But actually the stitched look gives us a view of exactly what is it that we still need to erase. Once it's sort of close and in the scene in a certain way, we can kind of reliably get back to our character once we've kind of bridged the gap a little bit more nicely. And so having sort of the right pieces in the right place so that we can get this to look very clean. We're able to sort of correct some of those problems and, you know, really create accurate changes to the necklace she's wearing and make it so that compared to what we had before, obviously I don't want this extra thing. That's going to guide Midjourney sort of in the wrong direction. But yeah, let's clean up that mess a little bit. But we can see how we sort of make progress with this. Each time we kind of erase out and resolve the inconsistencies between these, and obviously the kind of lines that we don't want to have existing within the scene. It makes a decision once, it may guide it to getting confused each time individually, and so we really have to pick, okay, now that we've really cleaned up this side and this side, is Midjourney's accurate inconsistency as models trained with Stable Diffusion or Fall AI? I think not one shot, but I think it tends to be more aesthetic and more interesting if you're willing to kind of put in the work towards better consistency. That's my opinion on that anyway. I think there's varying opinions, but I find like things like Laura don't really guide to character consistency in the same way, and you end up with scenes that don't look that cool. And a Stable Diffusion trained model, yeah, you might get a somewhat precise version of what it was that you've uploaded, but it's challenging to start to get a more diverse version of that into the like accurate scene that you end up wanting. And I think it's worth kind of putting in the effort if you're on a mission to create really consistent characters for, you know, a specific project or purpose. But if you're just having fun with them and you don't want to kind of fight for that level of accuracy of, you know what, this key really needs to look like this key, really needs to look like this key, really needs to look like this key in every scene that you have, it's like, you know, it doesn't matter that much. And Midjourney can kind of create, and make sure I have the right one here, Stable Diffusion can create something that feels close and not that interesting. But if you really want to kind of fix what randomness you have generated and create exactly what it is you're trying to create, you get much cooler scenes this way, in like the accuracy of what you're actually trying to do. My point would be to try to create AI influencers to build social media profiles. Yeah, you can probably do that with a low level of creativity, or a low aesthetic that is high consistency, or a high aesthetic that isn't that consistent on something like Stable Diffusion. It might be cheaper and a little less work. But if you kind of want to work on it until it's right and get it so that your character really feels like they should, it may be worth learning steps on Midjourney that help get you there. And it can be challenging, but I find it's like worth that effort to kind of build out the character exactly as you wanted it. And so at this point, these scenes are quite a bit closer, but perhaps we need to fix maybe just one, right? It's like, hey, this necklace should go all the way to the other end. I think Midjourney will be able to continue that in one shot and it'll feel nice. But we can kind of like go from there as we build more complexities into our scenes. And I think it's exciting to be able to have this level of control that we almost never had before. And this used to be really expensive on Midjourney. You used to have to pay for a yearly plan just to be able to touch this uploaded image editor. And now it comes with whatever plan you already have. And so you can just work on whatever it is that you've been doing and then kind of go from there for the next piece. I really like Midjourney as it was my first step into AI images. Greetings from Germany. Yeah, welcome, or nice to see you. I feel like I've seen you on some streams before, or at least in the comment section. So hi from the US to Germany. Fun to have an international audience on these things. I'm kind of bouncing between ideas on how to really drill down consistency and storytelling in the editor. How do you kind of like build the scene that is exactly what you're after? And it can be a little challenging, right? It's like, and I kind of want to imagine maybe something with this robot character, or even I had this like owl wizard in my last video that I think has been fun. And so maybe really trying to like step through what are some particular scenes that we want to see for these two characters in a specific way and figure out how to get there from nothing, I think could be really interesting. First time in a live stream, but watching your videos for a while. Some of the best out there. Oh, I really appreciate that, Ibrahim. That's very nice. Is that how you say your name? Ibrahim? But yeah, it's very fun to kind of really get on top of these things and drill down to exactly what we're trying to do. So let's see, I need to kind of remind myself. Maybe you'll start to recognize these stitches now, but if I save this just so I can grab it again, and think about how I might use this as an omni reference and create a few more scenes. Really what I wanted to download that for was to, I wanted to create a new chat for this GPT, and I wanted to work on creating some more scenes with these two characters. So I believe in my last video we had a prompt. There's a paste bin to this prompt. I don't have the paste bin link easy to copy, but I do have the prompt easy to copy. Clothing consistency is nearly impossible to achieve, especially in different poses. Yeah, I get that. And it's hard, especially with sort of complex costumes like this, right? We kind of have an owl, and that owl is wearing something around his neck, and he's wearing a robe, and he's got wings that like poke out from under the robe, and then there's a guy who's also wearing his own version of kind of a cape and robe and similar colors, and they mesh together, and you end up getting like a little bit of complexity that's harder to fix. And so without kind of omni-reference and a really well-optimized prompt, it can be really challenging to guide Midjourney into creating exactly that thing that you want it to, right? And so this is sort of random scenes at the moment, just to kind of see what ChatGPT comes up with if you have no idea. But we'll sort of think of a set of situations that we want to create, and we'll see if my GPT plus the editor plus potentially my tool is capable of kind of building out these scenes in a way that guide us to kind of exactly what we're after. Again, not 100% of the time will you get exactly what you have. That's especially going to be true if you don't use your omni references, which was my mistake here. So let me lock these in and run these last couple again. These are kind of randomized without the omni reference, and we'll never have exactly the scene that we were after. This is literally Harry Potter, which was not the point of these characters, but I think this will do a little bit more nicely for us now that we actually have the omni references. That's just straight up stolen. But yeah, so it's kind of written some different scenes for us. So storybook painting of a wise little owl creature floating on a floating rock in midair. They're casting a protective ward, and the boy hero in a flowing crimson cloak is doing a certain thing. And so we sort of have both characters, or in theory, we wanted to have both characters showing up. Midjourney is not quite handling it for this particular scene. This scene is a lot easier for it for whatever reason. We can kind of try to evaluate that from the prompt. But it'd be nice to know, and looking at this one too, see kind of how close we get. If we have a favorite scene between these characters and kind of what we've got going on. And so I actually like this first one. So I'm going to take this prompt and send it back to my GPT. Is it possible to run Stable Diffusion locally on Mac? I feel like Mac users are often limited with running these things locally. You need a powerful enough machine, and your computer, like there needs to be a GPU. I believe there is at least some Stable Diffusion models that have been sort of ported to Mac in a certain way, but I know it's more challenging. You don't have nearly as many like libraries and assistants and things to like help you get it done. I don't have a Mac. I haven't really tried to see exactly how hard it is, but there's definitely some challenges related to that if you are using a Mac. Probably better to find a software that runs it for you so that you can kind of not need to put it on your machine if that's the only computer you have. So what I want to do here is tell my GPT, hey, this was the most effective. This prompt was the most effective description of both my style. Oops, caps lock is a pain, but that's all right. I'll just tell it and ChatGPT won't be offended and think I'm yelling at it. Both my style and my characters. Could you please describe these characters and style using similar language again? Yeah, virtual machine is a fine way to go if you want to kind of go in that direction. Describe these characters and the style using similar language. the boy is sitting in a boat on a pond. So here, what I'm imagining right now is a plot where we've got the boy on a boat and the owl watching him, and then the boy falls into the water. So I want the boat to have like flipped over, and then I want the owl to sort of like save him with magic. And then they're both safe and sound. So we can kind of like have a set of 4 images that kind of tell a story. So first is this boat. The boy's in a boat on a pond, and owl is on the shore watching him. Next, the boy falls into the water, and the owl is surprised. And I'm gonna like add some descriptors, right? The larger owl character is surprised. I want the owl to cast magic and try to save him, levitating the boy out of the pond. Cool. And lastly, I want them both back on the shore, safe and sound. Maybe have them hugging or something. And so we're kind of like creating these 4 scenes for these characters. And this will be sort of our basic prompts to get us started. And we might need to use some more techniques, including kind of the things we've been trying in the editor, to sort of turn this into a story that feels like it's consistently in the same style, about the same characters, and accomplishing that same goal. So let's sort of try this out here. This is sort of the first image. I imagine boy drifting in the boat. This is the second image where we've got the boy falling into the pond. This is going to be the third image when it finishes generating, which of course will be the owl saving the boy. And lastly, this is going to be our 4th image where they're both safe and sound and live happily ever after in our fake little story. So how might this end up looking in terms of consistency to start? And so let's kind of see what ends up happening here. So already I find that the composition of these is going to be hard, right? Is like, you know what? These scenes are not feeling very detailed in terms of how like interesting they're able to sort of come together, right? We've got the boy in the pond sort of falling in, but it doesn't look much like what he looked like when he was in the boat, and also putting the owl in the boat was a challenge. So let's think about how we can kind of guide Midjourney towards exactly what we want without getting too complicated. So let's start with particularly the first image. I think we need to really drill down the composition, probably first with a prompt and then second with like what's actually happening in the distance. And so I think we did well with the style, but the composition of the scenes didn't seem super thought out. Let's start with the first one. What I want is, and so this is kind of like the path we need to go on to really build out exactly the composition of this scene in a certain way, and then we might need to come back in and affect the details when we've kind of gotten closer to what our character should look like. What I want is for the owl character to be close to the imagined camera, and the boy to be in the distance on his boat. Cool, right? The will be facing away. And the pond needs to be somewhat vast. And we can kind of generate this scene first with a lot of clarity in exactly how we want that composition to look, right? And the more detailed we are and the more clearly we describe it, kind of the better it will end up, right? Perfect clarification for this scene. I'll ensure strong composition and kind of go along and describing exactly what we end up seeing. And it works on a way to kind of get that to happen for sort of exactly what we're working on. And so hopefully this prompt will do a better job, and we'll be able to kind of have something we can work with in the editor more specifically. That doesn't mean we won't use something like this, which actually has a pretty high quality version, or, you know, maybe we might use something of, hey, our kid in a boat to a certain description, so we can like use that. I'm not sure this one is perfect, but like it's not impossible to want to rerun this again and kind of like have it. And so this is building up that composition more clearly, but obviously our omni references are not that useful for this particularly. Maybe we get one or two that puts our owl, but I think they want it facing towards us, and it really loves doing that. So it's a little bit of a challenge to kind of really feel like we're seeing the back of the owl. This sort of worked though. Obviously the editor will need to clean this up, but we now have our owl facing away in a pond where there's a boat and our character, which is just about the composition we were trying to build. And we may use something like this to replace our boat, right? This is actually a pretty good version of our kid in the boat. He's playing, he's having fun. And so these two images might be enough to kind of build the scene that is exactly what we want. And so how might that look if we were just using this stuff, right? So we may download this one when it's done. I can't rush it too much. 90%. Oh, I'm patient. I believe it'll happen. Yeah, cool. So if we download, and actually this one is pretty good too, but I think I like this one the most. If I download this, excuse me, and have this scene of our owl looking away, obviously he can't be wearing his necklace anymore. You want this robe to feel a little bit more cut off. But also, in the distance, we want to put our character. So we need to add another layer here. We need to use our smart select to sort of place this character and his boat back into the scene like ChatGPT or like Midjourney had imagined it up to this point. We can erase the background so that we just have this character and the boat, and we can move and resize this so that he is exactly where we expect him to be in the distance far away. And now we have our character somewhere close in a place that is sort of what we expect. And, you know, I can even imagine this sort of cutaway part is like there in the distance, and we have a pretty cool scene this way. I may just like make sure this is truly erased, and I may bring a little bit more back from this scene, right? So we don't need to kind of have everything perfectly gone. And I may even bring him up a little bit so he matches where the boat was in the original, right? So now it like is starting to feel a little bit more accurate. He might need to be even a little bit smaller out in the distance. And we can sort of submit this and feel like we've gotten closer to our character. How do you get humans generated by AI to look like real humans? I always find the output is somewhat like AI generated, regardless of the system I use to generate it. Oh, I can't use an Omni reference. It's tough. Obviously, this is not like a photorealistic scene, and we're not trying to. I find words that are maybe not typical in a image prompt, but are actually kind of like exactly what you want can be a pretty good way to sort of like build those things into what you have. Obviously, we have a lot less pixels when we sort of zoom in and kind of get that character into place, but we can get pretty close to what it is that we actually want. And it tends to be that we need to erase out again any of these little like extra white borders that were from our old scene and regenerate them to the best of our ability. But this character has started to become a little bit more clear, but also, yeah, he's in the distance and he's far away. So let me run this and then I'll answer your question with a little bit more detail. I just want to give that another chance to kind of be a little bit more just plain. But in essence, while this is generating, I think you want to use words like normal person, average looking person. You want to use words like candid and like looking away. And you want to have scenes that are almost mundane, right? And so I've sort of like been building a mood board of what I sort of think of as the ultra realistic version of like, this is kind of more what people look like than just like an average generation. And these are still AI generations that are not, you know, these aren't like real pictures that I've stolen from anywhere. I've just ended up sometimes generating things that feel a little bit more normal. And I think if you think of locations and places that are a little bit more normal, you can do a better job. Most of these are actually generated in 6.1. So in version 7, I think you can get even better set of references, but the prompts are pretty straightforward. Is it easy to connect two images with blank space between them and then generate what's in between them to make one cohesive image in the editor? That's essentially what we have done. And we can kind of imagine that if we wanted to make like a scene with, yeah, and I sort of want to give a useful example. But the short answer is yes. That's sort of what the editor seems to do, is replace the pixels that you've made transparent with pixels that make sense to combine the images. Sometimes if you try to do that and the images are too different, you might have problems. But if you kind of like let it work, you'll end up, you know, if you kind of generate your image in a way that, hey, these could fit together if only there was just like a better seamless connection between them, you can get something pretty cool. I think I have a video where I like made a bunch of my characters, and I'll sort of jump over to, I think it's just like my folder characters. I made a bunch of these characters all side by side in what's next to each other. And that's kind of the way to sort of piece them into place, is like, hey, generate one and then pan the image over, and then generate the next one and then pan the image over, and then generate the next one and pan the image over. It's sort of an older video, but that path is a great way to kind of guide Midjourney into, hey, I want this to fit next to this seamlessly. And it's really good at drawing lines that fit into what you kind of already have going for you. Yeah, I think for that, Ibrahim, the goal is going to be pretty much precisely, hey, generate your characters with prompts like, hey, I want a photo of, in like a mundane situation, a man sitting in front of his piano in an average looking home. Mundane photography, right? You're not throwing things with ultra realistic and stylized. You're putting things in with just like, the tags are not really what you expect for, hey, this is just kind of a normal situation. I'm not sure how real these are going to be, but it's like, this is just a guy in his house, and that's going to help. I've been meaning to mess around with the editor more lately because I canceled Photoshop. Yeah, it is starting to be like you don't need Photoshop nearly as much if you can kind of piece these things together. Literally what we did here was we took a layer that was another image and we put it into the scene, and obviously you lose some pixels because Midjourney isn't that high resolution, but it filled it in, right? And it's like it filled from here to here in a way that felt somewhat seamless in the style that we had, and it's like, wow, that's like starting to work. And so now we have our owl character and our guy in exactly the situation we had asked for, right? This is precisely the scene I wanted to build to kind of tell my story. I don't know if anyone just got here, but kind of my goal was to tell a story where first I had my, here, what I say? First, I have my boy sitting in a boat in a pond and the owl's on the shore watching him. Next, the boy falls in the water and the larger owl character is surprised. Now, next, I want the owl to cast magic and try to save him, levitating the boy out of the pond, them both back safe on the shore, hugging each other, right? Like, that path is a little story, and the first thing is to really build a composition. And when ChatGPT just wrote it, that composition was sort of randomized, but with a little bit of effort, we can kind of say, you know what? This storybook illustration of this scene, if we describe exactly what this composition should be, we have a much higher likelihood of getting exactly what it is we're after. The only problem is that we don't have that many pixels in our canvas, right? And so for this character to really feel consistent, can you increase the size of your editor canvas, or is it always just the size of the image you begin editing? Midjourney works like, or Midjourney's editor seems to, as far as I can tell, really just work on an aspect ratio. And it always sort of converts whatever you've given it into the most number of pixels it can fit into that aspect ratio. And so, as far as I can tell, it tries to like take what you've given it and make it a little bit bigger, but only as big as it can go. And so depending on like how wide or how tall your thing is, the resolution is kind of going to be different. And there's obviously like resolutions between 4:3 and 3:2, and you can kind of like get to any of them, but it just makes a correction when you actually click generate so that it's one of the things it's able to do. And you can't go higher resolution because it, the generative model can't make that many pixels in sort of one shot. And so it sort of treats it as good a canvas as it can, and then just overrides it on every like frame of diffusion with all the pixels that you gave it so that it doesn't change those. But sometimes they end up a little bit scaled if you had a bigger or smaller image. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit subtle, but that's kind of the clarity here. And so so obviously here we don't have much resolution, and when we've upscaled, we get a little bit more resolution, but it starts to become a messier image. So here, if we take it to my app and put in, nope, not this one, I didn't download it. Download my upscale, there we go. And we put it here. Oh, I wanted to be using, I guess I don't have a project for him. That's fine. We see that he's not that accurate. And so even though we've upscaled this and there's a lot of pixels, right? As we like look at all these details, we want it to really feel and look like him in the boat for the person coming after this, right? And so Midjourney doesn't really have a path to resolve that, but if we kind of like take this here and take this here, we can kind of resolve this side-by-side situation in a way Midjourney can understand, right? So if literally I create a collection and download and lock this, I can now come back to my editor. And this is what's a pain to do without what I've been building, is like, I want to be able to really fix this. And I want to line up, hey, where is this in my entire scene? And then make the correction, right? I want to actually make this guy this guy. And so two side-by-side images of the same boy in a boat, night and day, right? And we can kind of like lock in a little bit of the anatomy, his like size, to try to get it to be right, even though his eye is a little bit messy. I would like enough here so that it looks good, but we can kind of be like, hey, this is what our character looks like, and this is what it should look like. And now side by side, we have number 1 and number 2, and it can be pretty effective to be like, you know what, it's worth sort of generating this fix for my secondary scene so that it really feels quite a lot more, and maybe not perfectly. Obviously, I don't have a character reference yet or an Omni reference yet. Midjourney isn't quite ready to support an Omni reference in this moment, and so what we've discovered is we have to go back to 6.1 and then kind of erase some pieces and get the like eyes to be a little bit more of the right shape and the hair to be a little bit more correct. But version 7 is going to kind of get us closer, and then we can literally just take this as a character reference and in version 6.1 sort of generate the fix, and hopefully it like puts that in there. I didn't have Omni reference placed, but it's like Midjourney has that like that value saved for version 7, and so it's like refusing to kind of do that in version 6.1. But the idea here is now with the number of pixels that I have, I can get, and Midjourney is not as good at this on version 6.1 as it will be on version 7 when we have Omni reference in the editor. But if I download this original generation and I take it back into the app, right, we can my little web app here on tools.glibetry.com, if anyone wants to try it, we suddenly can fix the consistency in this part of the scene that our upscaler broke, and now look at kind of the whole scene and see, wow, that is so much better and higher quality, but also in the composition we were trying to create. And it looks really effective and really accurate and feels like this is the scene we were trying to build. So now if I accept this change and download this image, like we can see, not only did it put it exactly where it was and keep track of kind of what we had in here, but we've really built like an accurate version of this scene, even though he's tiny and Midjourney wouldn't normally get this right. We could obviously do something similar if literally all I wanted to do, and this is like the simplest thing you can do with this tool, right? The idea is you keep track of where your little lines are. So you take this, you download and lock it, you bring it to Midjourney and you say, hey, what I really want is painting of birds flying against a sunset sky, right? And you like clean this up and you clean this up and you clean this up and you like let Midjourney sort of draw like 50 birds, 12 birds, a painting of 12 birds flying against a sunset sky. Take out your character references, switch back to version 7, and just see how it ends up drawing birds. And it's nice to feel like you have control over what any particular part of your image is supposed to look like. So when this generates and we like want it to look better, we can take our favorite set of birds that Midjourney has generated, download the image, save the generation that we've now gotten. There's a little bit of a mess in here. I didn't clean that up. So sometimes if you like draw in Midjourney, it doesn't like sort of the shape of some of the lines. And so you end up with something a little messy. So I could wait before I download this and kind of get one more. But it seems like a nice way to kind of create something that feels really powerful and really beautiful in the composition that you're really after. Download this, or no, not upscale. I wanted to download this generation to to myself here, and then come back into my app and say, you know what, I want to put this here. And where does it go exactly? Well, it goes right there. And so the old versus the new, we've made a much better decision for like how the birds look in the distance of this composition, so that the thing Midjourney thought would make sense and look beautiful here now actually looks good and like it was really created by somebody. We download this image and look how cool. Sorry, I wanted to accept all changes. And see really how cool this works out to be. And keeping track of those corners and knowing exactly where they go seems really handy if you want to build this more complex composition. Again, always a balance between how hard you're trying to work on getting it right and how consistent and beautiful you can make it really be. But you can pick any part of anything and make it exactly what you want it to be just by prompting it a certain way. And the editor seems to unlock a lot of that and make it really, really powerful. And in the end, right, this, select all, again, early access. I'm still figuring out all my buttons. I got to kind of go to here and here, and I've selected my whole image. But this is now like a really powerful composition, and I can work on my next one, right? I'm telling a story. First, the boy is on the boat and he eventually falls in, right? And so how do I kind of demonstrate that with my scene? So maybe I'll even show ChatGPT this thing that I've just finished creating. I believe I showed him, I did not upload the one I meant to. So really it's the latest one that I maybe did not download yet. Download this image here, and I want to kind of come back and say, hey, ChatGPT, this is how that scene turned out. This is how that scene turned out. I told it how I wanted my story to go based on what you know about visual storytelling. What is the next scene you would have me create for this story I provided you? Please give me 4 options. And so now it sort of learned from this and will create my like next piece and try to like have exactly what comes next. And so this is beautiful visual storytelling. It like compliments me for a second. And now it's like, how do I do my sudden splash? And whether I choose the boy falls in, the underwater moment, or obviously the magical rescue has to come, which is part of the story that I gave it. But having this much control over exactly what it is we have, you know, these are going to be complex prompts, right? Let's come up with 2 prompts each for idea 1 and 2. And Midjourney will now sort of bounce back into what it normally does with us and hopefully create something cool out of this idea. And again, as we're like telling this story, we like to have as much control as possible. And so it's coming up with our storybook illustration of a small owl mage in the foreground. I don't really want the owl mage to be small, but maybe this one gets the idea about right. And if I had a better idea of my own composition, what I thought would make the most sense, we might get a cleaner thing. Obviously, it's going to help to have my omni reference. Again, this is the omni reference that is a stitch between character 1, character 2, character 1, character 2, character 1, just so that it really clarifies what each character looks like, and it clarifies the style of these characters in particular places so that we can have kind of a cool finished creation. This is what it has done without my omni references, and it's obviously sort of stealing from Harry Potter a little bit with kind of the rounded glasses and very like clearly a Harry Potter-esque wand, but I would rather use like the characters of my creation that I think I can kind of define as well as I want to. And so what does it look like when this character kind of falls into our pond? And what I may do is add a image reference from this scene, right? Actually, maybe something like this here to kind of define what it is that I have. So if I take this as an image prompt, it'll show me the location and the scene. Hey, I want him to be falling forward or falling backward into a boat. And so now with this omni reference and this, we can kind of get even closer to what feels like the same location that we have before, the same art style and the same direction, so that when we create this one, we get an even higher quality result. And so we'll see how that turns out. So I realize really just right now that if I'm going to be focusing on just this character, I really don't want to have multiple wrong characters in my reference. So I may try to come up with an omni reference that is just this one character, and I may have it somewhere. Yeah, let's give Midjourney this and then generate this again, removing the owl from the prompt. And I think we can kind of build the, hey, I'm falling into the ocean or into the pond composition that also feels like it's in the same style and vibe as our first scene, right? And so here, what I am going to do is take this, send this to GPT, this next scene about falling into the water will star just this character. So please have him toppling out of the boat and then him underwater. Oops. And then also send the image to ChatGPT. And we'll see how this goes. I'm not sure I want to capture both beats in a single seamless composition, but I'm curious to see what it's come up with. Oh, I'm here. Sorry, I just like had this open. I guess we'll take out the, maybe we'll use it as a style reference rather than an image reference, because I think it's changing a little bit more about this prompt than I expected. But I want the boy to really look like the boy and not be dressed like the owl to the best of my ability. And I think we can kind of create a cool scene in this way. Yeah, I'm not sure this is the smartest composition in the world, but why would we have the boat and be underwater? ChatGPT, what were you thinking? I asked it to please create an intense toppling scene and then what he looks like at the bottom of the pond floor. Because I think that's going to do a way better job at actually telling this beat of the story, to use ChatGPT's term. Because both feels very vague and doesn't really make a lot of sense. So here for this first one, I can use that style reference, but for this second one, I probably don't want to. I could use one of these as a style reference, but I don't really want a boat in it. So I'll just let the two images play out, one with a style reference and one without it. The omni reference with him in the background should do a pretty good job at sort of putting together exactly what the style is, because he's in places looking a certain way. So it should do a pretty reasonable job on this. And I'm excited to see what it comes up with. It's taking a little bit though. Aren't I on like turbo mode? Yeah, I'm going as fast as I possibly can. I know omni reference is supposed to take a little bit longer, but it shouldn't like take forever. That's crazy, right? That's a much better topple if I've ever seen one. It really did not handle underwater. I want it to be a deep pond. He's just like, he's taking a little bath. That's ridiculous. Though I do have an idea on how to save this one, because I think we can kind of get there. But I like this a lot. This one is like exactly the vibe. Whoa! There he goes. He is wearing a glove in one hand and not in the other, which is a little bit silly. But I think that also is a testament to something that could be very useful in here, right? Is like we can sort of highlight things like this and resolve them and see them next to other versions of kind of what you've got going on, and we can like, okay, how do we make this look like a hand? And we can just sort of fix this one and kind of go from there. I don't need to kind of get into too much detail about that at the moment because I think this on its own is a pretty good scene. But we can sort of bounce from one of these, or yeah, so from here to here to here, and it feels pretty good as far as a flow for how we tell this story. I'm not sure we need this one. The stone wall behind him doesn't make a ton of sense either from this scene, so this was just part of our building. I will put this in a new project, so let's just call this the Wizard Boy falls in the pond. And so we can kind of, it was here, take this as image 1 and take this as image 2 and put them both in here. But we need to do better with these I'm underwater situations because this really doesn't feel underwater at all. Though we may be able to turn off omnireference because it may be that omnireference is preventing this from feeling underwater, and actually simply do a retexture because I think we talk about the color, and we really just want this style of being underwater to come through. What's the best way to reference a composition without having it affect the style, characters, and color? Let's see. So the composition without affecting the style, characters, and color. It's, there's like a lot of ways to describe it. But probably the easiest thing to do is closer to how we ended up creating this image here. I think that really we might have a clear prompt that gets us fairly close, and we had a few more images that we had done to kind of get to this. But if you want to control the composition, it's better to do it manually in the editor, right? Is to generate the image of your guy in a boat and generate the scene that you're trying to create and then put them together to kind of let it look the way you want it to look. And it lets you really build exactly the scene that you want without having to go into details about your character one at a time. I think it's tough to... Midjourney doesn't truly understand the relationship between things. And so saying things like, oh, there's an owl in the center of this and a boy in the top right, and the boy in the top right is in a boat and he's leaning over. It's tough. If I want to draw circles and label them as specific things, or is that something that works better with LLMs? Well, I think that's going to be something that works better with specifically the 4.0 generative model, right? I think getting the ideas of what is where and how do things relate to one another, I think we're going to have a better job creating what we're after. And whereas here, it's Midjourney is probably going to be pretty good at the style that we've created and keeping the character in that style. Would you generate the prompt using your image generator for my character? It's GPT 4.0 is really gonna understand how someone exists half blowing in the sand, how someone exists underwater, and using this as maybe even an image prompt might be a better way to guide Midjourney. Yeah, exactly. Using references from 4.0 in Midjourney is going to be a stronger way to really control the composition, and retexture a image from Midjourney into the exact style you're after is going to be a great way to kind of keep 4.0's smartness in the scene you're building and use chat gpt or use Midjourney's like aesthetics, use how like its ability to create really beautiful, really cinematic, really, you know, artistic images compared to 4.0, which seems to have like 3 or 4 styles, and that's kind of it. So 4.0 is an agent that builds like one line at a time, and it's like, okay, let me think about what to build in this spot and this spot and this spot and this spot, and then come back and put it into here. Yeah, I need to use Retexture more. I haven't used it. It's powerful. So just so people understand what Retexture essentially does is it locks in what you've generated as a depth map, right? So it understands how far away different elements of your scene are, and it tries to lock that in exactly. And so objects in your scene, people in your scene, the pose, the like things in the background, all sort of, not only do they know their exact like pose and position and place, but they know like how deep they are and how far away they are. And so when it changes it, it forgets all of your color information, it forgets all of your style information, it forgets all of your like stuff except the physical anatomy of the way this nose turns and the way he's sitting and standing. And like this is a much more useful, specifically a much more useful image reference right now. I think it's not that useful a style, or it's not that useful a retexture, because I think it just doesn't, like, this anatomy doesn't fit my style as well as I want it to. But as an image reference, creating this scene, I think we'll find that it does a much better job. I think we still need the character reference, but now we're going to kind of get it to look a lot closer to being like this, but have it be our own Midjourney style and our own character and our own scene that feels a lot more coherent. Can you add an image style references for retexture, or is it prompt based only? You can use image references and style references, but at the moment you cannot use omni references, which is like how we get consistent characters the most reliably. And so I think because of this style reference, we get a much cooler thing. And let's look and see how it looks in a retexture. I think we'll find that I get a much cooler character without it because of my omni references that I've placed here. And it feels more artistic and like a scene that Midjourney would draw, at least somewhat more reliably, whereas a retexture, the like shape of this nose and the shape of these eyebrows and this character without an omni reference might not be enough to create the exact scene we're after. So I downloaded that. Let me come back and copy this prompt. Is Retexture still using V6? That I'm not 100% sure of. In theory, it's supposed to be using version 7, and it says it, like, from all the things that show up, it looks like it is. Let me click new here. Let me drag this in. And let me, yeah, paste. Retexture. So, but what happens is that, like, you know, I kind of want a style reference here. It may bring the colors in pretty well so that when I retexture this, it'll start to look something like my character, but the anatomy here is just drawn differently. ChatGPT has a way that it draws things with these, like, you know, very pure eyebrows and very, like, it's hard to explain what's like different and wrong about it for my character. It's like, it's close. It does the little sepia thing, which is its own thing, but I find compared to this of like locking in Midjourney or ChatGPT's pose and ChatGPT's thing, having it understand the concept that ChatGPT drew, but only using it as an image reference, I find that these scenes were much like cooler and more accurate for like what we have going on. I'm not sure we need this little key, but now that we sort of like have him having fallen into the pond, we get like something that's a little bit more useful to us and really creates the emotion of the scene that we want. And adding the shading on the eyes and making it feel like he's really in trouble, I think is a cool thing for this story. And so I can now kind of, I see what you mean. This is very helpful. Happy to share it. I find this really interesting, and like, how cool is it that we now have access to all these different pieces that we can use to really build up complex scenes and stories that really feel like they have the narrative that we want them to. And so I'm feeling like here, as I'm sort of building this scene, I feel like I'm ready to, like, okay, I now have this kid in the boat. I have him falling out of the boat, and I have him at the bottom, and now the owl is worried, right? And so how do I kind of like show this as I continue the story? And it's like, okay, I want, and even I can tell this to ChatGPT, right? It's like, here, Alt or Control Tab, tell this to ChatGPT. I have this guy and this guy and this guy. We're now up to what's your end goal with this project as animation? This project is really just an example. I'm trying to see how much control we have over these things. My goal right now is to learn the editor well enough to create stories. I have sort of future ones, but right now I am thinking I really just want to piece these together and understand what's still challenging and what Midjourney has unlocked with the number of tools that they've given to us, including kind of the tool that I'm building now with the ability to let us sort of, and we saw it a little earlier when Midjourney couldn't deal with this like smaller portion of the image. ChatGPT, or my tool was able to get Midjourney to focus on this and have it be at much higher quality and consistency, and feel like even though he's far away, where Midjourney like distorts things, we were able to like resolve that after an upscale, as well as like put these birds into the scene just by kind of highlighting it and bringing it over to Midjourney. And so this is me testing to see what's still falling off, because after developing this, I feel like we get pretty close, but I'm wondering what still is left to go. I've kind of like done calls with people, and they've been very excited to try this system. This stream is my first time kind of talking about it publicly, and that's because you can now sort of get here and work through it. But we're like making progress one at a time. You said, gotcha, I watched your YouTube vid about multi-character recently, which came out, and it's awesome time because I'm doing a 2-character little project right now. Yeah, this is another great example of that, and it's awesome to see that you like are seeing that, using it, coming to the stream and using that too. I think like we're making a lot of progress. So I am on to the next scene where I want the wizard to be like nervous for the boy, and maybe even like it would probably go, this is probably really scene 4, right? Like I would show first the owl watching the boy falling in, the owl seeing the boy fall in, surprised and scared, and then come back to, hey, the boy is now at the bottom of the pond, and then the owl starts to do magic. And then the boy levitates out of the pond, and then they're together in sort of a final scene. And I think that's how I would kind of flow all of this together into the story that we're trying to tell here, just to kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go from there. So we're up to these 3 scenes. I have a few scenes I want to create starring just the owl character. Just the owl character now. the goal would be to have to show him first surprised and worried for the boy who is falling. The next scene, I want him casting a spell. And we can kind of see pulling, and I'm going to say golden magic energy from the air. And we can kind of see how that comes together when we generate generate some prompts for that. So I have two different scenes here. One, he's reacting to the boy falling, and the second, he is casting magic before the boy starts to levitate out of the water. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this is the GPT I created optimized for Midjourney version 7 that has, and I have a video that sort of goes into the prompt that builds this GPT, but we've really tried to make sure that all of the prompts that it writes are as capable as possible at controlling Midjourney's output. And so I've given away that prompt for free, and also, like, this GPT is accessible if you have a ChatGPT account, or if you use any other thing, you can take that prompt and bring it to maybe Claude, or if you use any of the other large language models to do your generation. It just helps to be very descriptive and specific with how you generate prompt or how you write prompts for Midjourney, and that can be a lot of work. So having a large language model write them for you simplifies that process, as long as it understands exactly what you want to. And so we've had to be pretty specific about the kind of clarity of the prompts. And so I realize that this prompt, I don't have my owl character references so easily. So let me just drag a few of these. Oh no, I do have them right here, right? These are good. Let me see. Yeah, this is right. Okay, so now I have this prompt to kind of guide the owl character. And I may put a style reference of the owl character by the water. And what that'll do is sort of help describe the scene to the degree of accuracy that I'm after, right? And so we'll see as we get a little closer that there's going to be things we have to clean up to make it feel consistent. But we have created this scene here with the owl standing by the pond, and we want it to continue to feel like he's standing by the same pond. And the best way to do that, I think right now, is to set it as a style reference and have a prompt refer to the similar place. He hasn't moved much, but we kind of like want everything here. And so let's paste, or let's generate this, and let's also generate the next one, though I might use a slightly lower style weight. So I believe the style weight goes to 1,000 and defaults to 100. So I'm going to go to like 25. So we have the style, but it's not as high because the magic will change some colors, and the style reference I want to be a little bit lower, but still sort of give the vibe of being outside by the pond. And I'm realizing that probably if he's standing here in the first scene, he may not Also, surprise is so hard to see on an owl's face. I'm like trying to do it, but he probably does not have a pond in the background because he's facing away, right? So this is cool though. I know it's not precisely what we're after, but he's like, it sort of shows him as a powerful wizard, and I kind of like the vibe. Um, that's cool. That feels pretty much like the magic scene that I want, but obviously he shouldn't be. The pawn shouldn't be in the background. The pawn should be almost invisible. Um, so So I'm basically explaining the situation that I'm in to ChatGPT so that it can write me a better prompt for like to sort of make the composition make more sense. So I'm saying the casting a spell scene is so cool, but the other scene, the composition, doesn't make so much sense. Since my original scene shows the back of the owl as he looks out at the pond, when we cut to the owl's shocked face, it should have a bit of the pond in the foreground, but the background should be nearly free of water. And so if we're able to kind of guide our scene to have like closer to the simplified version of this, we may see that, or the idea of like, hey, water is in front of the owl, but behind the owl is like a regular background. And so the foreground edge of the pond, maybe a little bit of muddy banker stone. And then what I might do is have ChatGPT also generate this scene for my owl character. And so I will give it the same Omni reference that I just gave Midjourney, if I can find that again. I'm just doing this off to the side because I don't need you guys scouring through all of my generated images. Not that they don't all end up in a video anyway. But let me, where'd that go? Oh, there it is. It must be this here. No. This one. Cool, this one. And then I think it can define the composition again, and maybe we'll use it for the style, for the image reference, the style reference, or perhaps the retexture. And so, would you generate this scene for me too, with the for this character reference? And we'll sort of see the progress come together. While that happens, I just want to sort of evaluate how consistent this boat is. It seems like not that consistent, but pretty close. A little bit different, yeah. I think we can probably clean that up a certain amount. Let's see what ChatGPT came up with. Oh, it's still going. Okay. So let me download and lock this, and we can kind of head to Midjourney and see if we can align this with some accuracy. So if we come back to here, we open the editor, we say new, and we drag in our boat here. I want to sort of make these feel a little bit more similar, right? And so I'm kind of going to go ahead and do side by side paintings of the same boat, night and day. And we can kind of see what that turns into. And so, this is just like, hey, two different, and maybe it's not really night and day, but I think that's what it sort of looks like to Midjourney looking at these, and we can kind of clean up what's wrong with it. This is really should have been really the back of the boat, but maybe doesn't matter too much. I just want to see what this comes up with, and if we need to fix it again, I don't mind. So let's save our generation, and let's look at it here. Oh, I just dragged in the same one. Whoops. Let's reject all changes and drag in the new one. There we go. Honestly, that's enough for it just to not be a mess. I don't really care so much about it that, we can sort of see it in the scene itself. But I feel like that's enough to kind of feel like we fixed the accuracy there. So when this is done, we should jump back to the collection, and we can see this scene feels a lot more clean and complete. And we may end up retexturing this image to feel like it's really the same style and time of day, because I'm not sure I like the green, but we can definitely get that with a style reference, and so I think that'll be nice. This is a cool image of our owl by the water, and I think similarly, we're going to kind of go ahead and try to use this style on this image reference and this Omni reference, right? So we're going to sort of download the expressiveness that ChatGPT has come up with and see if we can use that to guide the image into being even more accurate, right? And so let's use the style, use the image, and use the Omni reference to create this, or no, it's this prompt, right? Yeah. And see if we can get a little bit closer. I realize this is a bit of a long stream, but I'm kind of on board to getting to the end of this little project that I've come up with for myself. Feel free to let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm happy to answer them as we go on our way. But normally, yeah, I realize I try to cut it off when we get close to 2 hours, and now we're already at 2.5, and I feel like I've got another 45 minutes to go at least. But I think we're making cool progress here, and I think that this owl will turn out pretty well. Maybe the style reference is too much. Oh no, it's probably just the words of this kind of guiding it towards being. You know what I probably want to do? I probably want this to kind of understand that I am understand that I'm standing on something. So maybe I'll generate a couple more. But I think that probably the best way to kind of make progress here is to zoom out on a scene like this that I almost like, and then replace the bottom of the scene with kind of the exact thing that I want. So I have a little bit more pond to work with, and then kind of the talons for my owl will come back. But I want him to be like more surprised. And so maybe I have to take these out and we'll see what that comes to too. Because I liked how ChatGPT interpreted the expression here, and I would like to use that if I can. This owl isn't really supposed to have hands. He's supposed to just have wings, which the Omni reference does, but I think ChatGPT got confused and put hands on it. So this looks pretty cool. Keep getting new ones that are pretty exciting. I want to try sort of my idea though. I want to try kind of having a little bit more pond first, right? So I have more to work with. And then, so let me just generate this without an Omni reference. And maybe bring these as image references and paint a little bit of this out so that he's more likely to be standing on here. But we have like a detail of like, this is what the rock looks like and this is what this looks like. And maybe one of these will feel close. See if that makes some progress. A little bit of that erasing out, right? We're sort of assuming that it can figure out the distance and differences between these kind of scenes in a way that our owl is standing in a place. And we might have to come back and sort of bring the talons back in, but I think my image rag tool sort of gets us pretty close to that. And this is cool because I think it means we can kind of use this much and maybe even clean up all of this and let it treat this as ground in a somewhat real way that we can now bring back. And I feel like we'll have gotten fairly close to exactly the scene that we're after. And he'll really feel like at the edge, being at the edge of the pond, which I think would make it nicer to kind of like get that consistency we're after. Just to kind of remind ourselves of where we are at. We have sort of our first layout scene, the idea is the kid is in a boat. The kid topples out of the boat. The kid is at the bottom of the water. And then the owl first recognizes that there's a problem, starts casting magic, and then brings him and levitates him out of the water, and then they all live happily ever after. Just a cute little project. We're trying to really feel like we have control over the composition and result to the degree that we would need to kind of like build a somewhat complete scene. And so I'm hoping these kind of get us to that point, even though this we're fighting with it a little bit to kind of get there. And I realize that it may have like sort of the wrong information already, and we may need to kind of put it up against sort of other elements of this stitch to sort of correct it in Midjourney. But I think as a start, this is a pretty cool scene. And so I'm just about done fighting with it at this point, and I kind of want to see what it does, what else we can do with it from here. But I think this was good progress, right? So we've kind of built 1, 2, 3, 4, and sort of a fourth scene, but obviously we don't have quite as high level character consistency at this point, just because we can't use an omni reference in the editor here. But still, I think this is a pretty cool scene. I might upscale this again as we are like making changes using my tool. It sometimes helps to have smaller portions of the image that have more pixels in them, and an upscale helps get us there if Midjourney doesn't just give us a black screen. So in the meantime, I think we kind of want to come back to what does our double stitch of owl and person look like to kind of create the last scene here. And I think I want the large owl should be hovering in the sky. Golden magic circling around him, and the boy should be being lifted by that magic, which sort of forms tendrils around him. The pond and the now empty boat are in the distance. And so ChatGPT is going to write a prompt that maybe doesn't get us to the end of this project, the end of this composition, but will hopefully guide us a little bit closer and give us something to work with that can create something close. So I think it's trying to generate the image now, and I would rather it come back to its original like prompting strategy. So I may have to explain to it precisely what I want. But I'm curious to see what these images are, because we may be able to use them. It's sort of fun, even though it takes a long time. I'm a little bit worried. I'm not sure it's going to happen in a way that like looks good. It seems like it's just going to be the owl, but maybe somehow there'll be room for the boy to be like getting levitated in this same scene, and that'd be cool. I get that it like hasn't gotten this far as it's going through and generating more and more. I'm glad we have owl wings instead of talons because that's going to make it a little easier. So I think this one is going to be our winning image. And maybe it'll generate what we want. No, there's no boy. How about this one? Yeah, no. All right. I don't think I'm going to use either of those. And I'm just going to say 4 versions of prompts like normal so I can bring these ideas to Midjourney. And then I'll sort of give it back my 2-person prompt. Would you be able to incorporate this with the other character who's supposed to be being lifted out of the water? And I'm just going to kind of remind it of this stuff. And send it this again. Just so that it has all the details on like how to do this properly. And we'll see what this does on its own. I also want to see what it does with a style reference of this, because I think whichever my favorite scene was, I wanted to kind of, and would my favorite scene not have wings? Was that the problem? Yeah, my favorite scene had talons coming out of the hands too. All right, that's good to know. I think this was it. We'll use this as a style reference to help guide it so that the magic kind of looks the same, but I don't want to fight it too much. It's like doing both. It's a challenging idea. See if any of the prompts work. It's mixing them together real well. Can you link to the newer ChatGPT art designer? Absolutely. Let me just copy this link and I'll throw it into the chat. There you go. Yeah, this is from a couple videos ago. I think it was the one titled I've created like 8,000 images in version 7. I also have the prompt for the GPT in that video too. So if you jump over on my channel to that video, you should be able to get there. No problem at all. Would you be able to because I think we do need a little bit more guidance to get Midjourney to understand where each character should be in the scene. And I think ChatGPT will be able to come up with a pretty good one using 4.0. And now our GPTs use 4.0, and how nice is that, right? Um, but yeah, these have been just mixing our characters together. I think truly just because the scene is so complex. And I'm hoping ChatGPT can kind of get around that. But I'd also prefer I just did this in landscape mode, like everything I've uploaded to it this entire time, but it just assumes it knows what's best. And portrait mode it is, I guess. Did I just rhyme? Am I a poet and I know it? All right. Here we go. That's going to be room for both the owl and the boy. This is feeling a lot more likely to actually work. It took some fighting with it, but I think we're going to like this result. And without omni-reference, this isn't that much like my character. It's like pretty close, but I think I would like a little bit better um, in a few areas. But I think this prompt will be useful enough to use as an image reference while we create this next scene. So if I put this in here and use my omni-reference and use the prompt, we may get pretty close. And I may try again with an even higher image weight. I think this is probably, and I know it's like not quite, but I weight 3. We may get even closer. I know this is a challenge. It's when you really are trying to control the composition deeply and you're trying to like incorporate magic and movement and all these different things that make it kind of like hard to do the things you're trying to do, it's tough. But by like putting in that effort, it can, I imagine, often pay off. And I'm imagining this sort of accomplishing it. But I may ask ChatGPT to make another similar scene, but this time in a landscape aspect ratio. But that's actually already cool. It's not quite precisely what I was after, but it's so nicely my character, and it's the magic and the levitation that we like are really trying to make happen, and it feels like we've almost entirely created our scene. Um, that feels cool. Obviously, we'll have things to fix. Our owl should not be wearing boots. He should not have talons. He should just have wings. Um, he shouldn't have hands, that's for sure. But I think we've made a lot of progress. Even something like that is close. But I want this to come together too, because I think with an even better image reference to kind of guide it into the scene that we're after, I think we'll get a really cool image. This is cool though. I may generate this again with that as an image prompt too, and see if we kind of make our way towards the magical scene that we're really after. I wonder if I'm alt-tabbed, it just chooses not to do this. It feels like it's taking longer because I leave, but I also don't have the patience to like wait for it. Oh, this is a better scene. And it's got the wings. Yeah, that didn't even help. But I'll take this. Oh my, that might actually be the one. I may very simply go to Midjourney, upload this. I'll do new. Upload this, and on Retexture, just include our original magic image. Do I have that? I must. And use this as a style reference to kind of get the scene to be a little brighter and less sepia. Retexture, generate. Because like I think, oh my god, like this is pretty much my character. This is pretty much my owl. This is rising out of the scene as I want him to be, and he's surrounded by the tendrils of magic that I was hoping for. And the retexture loses almost everything about the consistency, which is unfortunate. Let's see. What can we do about that? Well, we could go into Photoshop and like brighten this up, which might be the answer. But I would love to see what we can do in the editor to sort of build this scene even closer to kind of like what we're actually after. Because I feel like this is so close to our scene that I really want to... you know what? I actually don't want to use Smart Select. I really just want to paint. I am going to delete everything and paint just like this much boy, and also drag this in again. No, not this one. Drag Midjourney's latest one in, or ChatGPT's latest one in again, and this time erase out our boy. And here we are going to move and resize him to kind of be a little bit smaller, a little bit rotated, and coming out of the water like this so that the magic really feels like it's pulling on him. And I think with this kind of vibe, we'll actually get pretty close. And I just want to paint out a little bit more so maybe the magic kind of like goes to him in this way. And we sort of show off the power of the wizard and really feel like we're pulling him into the scene that we're after. And I clicked retexture, which was not the correct thing to click. But this will kind of get us close. I realize now that I erased all this, I sort of want to erase a little bit more so that the trees are not going the wrong way. But hopefully Midjourney will come up with the sort of cool magic that we've created out of this here. And I think we don't want extra birds, but we can like erase that with a simple prompt. And I want to see sort of what it does in sort of all of this. Okay. Owl, wizard, casting, magic. And instead of using retexture, we may have to use just a really strong image reference and an omni reference to see if we can pull together our style a little bit more reliably, I think that the character reference was too much, but I'm hoping that this generation, and I'm not saying we can't just use this generation, but I think Midjourney can make the scene feel better if we just pull in this image reference, and I think this prompt will probably do okay. Excuse me. And see how well Midjourney can do. I'm dreaming again, but it's too much to ask. Oh, some cool ones? Perhaps? I think this is as close as we're going to get on this scene. And it's not ideal. It's coming out. Does kind of look like my guy, but I think it's just like not the right emotion or composition. I think ChatGPT 4.0 will have had to have called this nailing it. Though I think being able to grab it out of the editor and create this scene was certainly a like win in that regard. So let's drag it in here. And did I lose my surprised owl on the edge? Yes. So I also have this image from here-ish. One of these. And we can kind of like take pieces that don't feel consistent enough. So we can kind of highlight our owl in each of these scenes, right? Obviously, we have this owl standing away, this owl facing us, and I don't need to go too crazy. And then this owl here, and we kind of want to make corrections to how this owl ends up looking in each of these situations, right? So we have sort of 1, 2, 3. Is it just 4 owls? And we'll sort of drag them out of the project or out of that collection and create a new one. And I may find a good pure reference that I have from an older generation of this owl so that I have a good character reference for him. And or a good Omni reference for him that we can possibly use and see how that's cool. Maybe let's take that one. No, it doesn't have a wing. I want both wings reliably. Cool. All right, let's add this one into here and clean this up. Sorry, let me refresh. Here we go. So here is kind of going to be our true reference of our character. And now we have this collection with all of these owls in it. It might be too much. Let's break it up into 3, and let's bring this owl back in another time. So now I have two separate kind of collections to work with. This first one will do a download and lock, and we will come over to Midjourney. And I will come over to Midjourney. I'll create a new image here and use this latest stitch that we got. And we kind of want to have 3 side by, and click Midjourney, doesn't like this, okay. 3 side by side paintings of the same owl character. And if there's anything that we don't like from how this owl kind of came together, which I think there's a little bit of, we can take, and I'll just add another reference of the same exact thing. But essentially what I want to do is find a wing that feels right. And now I have just a wing that I can put into sort of place to make these talons kind of go away, right? And so let me paint out a little bit more and kind of like have this wing sort of ready to go. And I need to rotate this to a certain degree so that we can kind of use a little bit of my owl's wing in this part of the scene so that we don't have to see the talons, right? And so if I can paint away from this one and hide the talons here, and paint away from this one and hide the talons here, and then come back to this and say, you know what I really want is just a little bit of wing to prove that this is how this part of the character should look. And so this kind of gets us to the point where we know like how this should come together. And so now if we Control C, Control V, no, we don't have that. We need to paste in our owl again. Ta-da! All right, and now on this layer, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to erase everything over here, and we're going to keep a little bit of this side. And we're going to move, and obviously we need to erase anything that still exists from this. Oops. And put a little bit of wing over here that we can use to sort of define how this owl looks like on this side. And I understand this is a bit of a pain, and that's okay. We have a little bit more to erase over in our initial place, and probably we want a little bit of less going on here. But now we have the front, the back, and the side of these character feeling a lot more consistent. There may just be little tiny things we want to touch up and make feel a little bit closer, but really I don't mind at all how this character is looking across these. I'll sort of take out the runes here and take out the runes here, and there's a little bit of extra wing going on down here, but that should be ready to go for these couple of characters. So if I generate this, having the reference of our owl within the image itself should let us correct the problem we ran into and have a really high quality result for the owl character. And I think if I did okay, even all 4 of these look really quite close to kind of what we're after. I might take this one. I think it looks the coolest. and I'll download this back, the original generation, and we'll put it back into the scenes that we had generated earlier. And again, this is what pretty much you can only do with the tool that I have been working on. So I am like excited to have you guys finally be able to try this and let me know what you see. But seeing how it really works is an important part of the process, and it is kind of some effort. But to know not only what it is that you're changing, but also exactly where it goes, so that, and it's more true in this scene here where we kind of fixed this owl. Oops, we didn't fix this owl. I uploaded the exact same image. I downloaded this though, so let me reject all changes here. This is why I look at it and upload the right thing, not the stitch I originally downloaded, but the change I made. We're gonna have a better fixed owl for our character that actually looks really high quality and still fits into the scene that we've created. And so now if we accept this, this scene becomes very useful for us. And when it's done, which it has not quite done yet, but it's now finished. And now this scene feels a lot closer to our actual idea, and our character looks correct. And we get to take our favorite image of the things that we really like about this. And then we can come over and do a very similar thing for these characters. Different problems, but pretty much the same diagnosis, right? We download and lock this. We come over to we come over to Midjourney. We say, hey, new, and we upload this image. And now these wings are far too sprawling and don't really look like our owl's wings. And these talons are probably fine, but these ones have quite a few problems, and so require some cleanup, right? And so we can take, and to make it a little easier and not feel like I'm working with the whole image here, I can copy this and now paste this. No, I have to open my snipping tool. And where'd that go? It's like in my notifications. How'd that work? Okay. And save this, and I'm just going to save it to my downloads to make my life a little bit easier. And then I have something that I can drag in here and use as a layer. Obviously, it does not need to be this big, but this is a much better bottom of my owl than the one I had. The problem is, I didn't mean to click enter there. The problem is there's way too much like other stuff. So I need to do this smart select thing on this image and make sure that I'm only selecting the real parts of the owl that I can use and leaving behind the parts that I can't. I meant to collect these. And so then if I erase the background from here, this is a true useful piece of the owl as I wanted it. And so when I erase the background, I can actually use this piece here. And again, I can make changes if any of it is not correct, right? Like this maybe needs to be cleaned up a little bit, and maybe even moved up, right? So it seems like our owl is actually a little bit shorter, right? If this goes all the way down to his legs, this is going to be a closer match. And I probably want a little bit more wing, right? So I can kind of do the same sort of thing here with this part of the reference. And I can open my snip again, take this, save it, which goes into my downloads. And we can now paste that latest as another asset we can use to build out maybe the wings of this character, right? So if I paint this out and use just the kind of wing piece, and now we have something that's going to feel a lot closer to our character's wing as it should be. And this actually goes up this way and feels correct, right? And so leave that where it is. That can't move, otherwise it won't fit back into our scene correctly, but this will look very, very cool. And so now we just have a little bit of cleanup to do in the original layer to kind of make that fit a little bit more nicely. And the same thing over here, we have a little bit to erase from this piece here. And we can drag this in one more time and do the other wing, right? And so we can erase around this. We can make our brush a little bit bigger and erase a little bit of everything. And now we have a wing that we can put, using move and resize, exactly where we want it. And now these are like accurately the right wing in the right place at the right time. And if I finish cleaning up and using these things as assets, we can have a pretty cool owl scene that feels like I'm really matching the consistency. So if I go ahead and generate this, I do want to, come back here. I do want to make sure that I don't take away too much from the edge of this scene, but I think this will let us create a scene that looks a lot closer to the owl that we're after. I may need to do something similar with these wings if I feel like they're not accurate enough. And so we can kind of decide what needs to be done as we like continue finalizing these. But yeah, let's come through here and kind of like make this a little bit better. And yeah, let's give little wing tips to this owl because I think that'll help make this feel more accurate too. So we'll bring this in, add a layer, we'll erase really almost everything. And I can kind of do that first and then bring it back right here. And so now we have just a little tiny thing that we can move and rotate and move. Midjourney is a little finicky. Why is it fighting with me so much? Okay, let's resize it, make it bigger first before we move. Let's give ourselves more to touch before we move it. Okay, put this here. I guess this is the way to do it. And then paint off everything that we just brought back. And do the same thing over on the other side. So we can kind of like, oops. We can kind of erase out the other wing and feel like we only have that, but move it over here, rotate it. And let's see how that goes. I feel like I can get a little bit better of the tip of the wing. And now let's paint again, now that it's in place, and we can erase out the rest of this character. And so now these wings feel a lot better, these talons feel a lot better, this owl feels a lot more complete and a lot more like the character we designed. And I think it's turning out really, really well. So let's see what we get out of these. And we can kind of see the final corrections we've made to our scenes as we've really tried to solidify the likeness of our character to what I think is a really impressive level of detail. And this isn't perfect, but that one's pretty good. So let's download this image. Let's save the generation. And we will bring that back into my tool so these changes we made can go directly into the scenes we've generated, right? So if we drag this back, not only have we like fixed it from looking much less like our character, ChatGPT just sort of made something up, to much more like our character, but also a really dynamic total scene that I feel like only ChatGPT could have like come up with for us, or come up with for us. And I think that this change, the new version, is a huge improvement. It feels much more like that original scene we're on. I think I can safely accept all of these changes and really appreciate and enjoy the results. And so now, as we kind of like work through these images, we have a scene where first a character, our owl is watching our hero in a boat as he then, let me just refresh because it got a little confused, as he then topples in and then he is at the bottom of our pond, and then this is just a reference. So he topples in. Our owl is surprised to see him, which is this scene here. Then he's at the bottom of the ocean. So our owl starts casting magic, and finally shows off his collection. This is another reference, so we can delete both of these. And so now, as we've done it, we kind of go through and tell our whole story in order, where once upon a time, boy was playing in his boat. He topples out. Owl is scared. He finds himself at the bottom of the pond, and so the owl casts a magical spell and raises him out in kind of the vibe that we had tried to do. I know this is sort of a complex goal and there's a lot of moving parts, but when you want to control what you're creating with this level of detail, it really is the best way to do it, I think. And having the Midjourney editor let us control all of these things, as well as having tools.glibetry.com for this image rag process of adding context to the image of your generation within the image you're generating, I think creates a lot of possibilities for the types of things you're able to do. With that, unless there's any final questions, I am going to go ahead and turn off the stream. I've been streaming for, it tells me I've been live for 3 hours and 15 minutes. This is the longest stream I've ever done on this channel. So I hope you guys have appreciated the content, and I think there's a lot going on here, and I'm excited to continue to play around with this and learn more and figure out what else we can do. Until then, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.